on?
It should come up any minute now, Chair.
Yes. There we go, I can see it. Right. Good afternoon and welcome to the Transformation, Commercialisation and Corporate Services Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday the 30th of November 2021. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and may be broadcast via the authority's internet site. The image and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the authority. With that in mind, if I could take you to agenda item number 1, and that is apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. We've had from Councillor Harvey Jones and from Sami Farid, our co-opted member. Okay,
thank you. Okay, and item number 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for anybody to declare? No. Okay, so moving on.
Chair, before we go on, we've also had apologies from Councillor Geraint Thomas, the Cabinet member. He sent his apologies.
For the commercialisation item, Myra, is it?
The Cabinet member, yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay, lovely, thank you. Okay, so moving on to item number 3, page 5 to 14 of the report. The report has been requested to lay out early stage plans on how the Council can address our challenges in delivering outcomes from a commercial perspective, and would be keen to learn more on how the following areas of change are to be progressed. The commercial environment, we'd like to understand and create an organisational environment that enables commercial activity, and look at the investment programme, which means looking at creating a portfolio of investment opportunities, reviewing current contracts to ensure value for money, linking in any outcomes on recommendations on the third sector report earlier in the year. And for today's meeting, the committee will review the report submitted, consider and explore the proposals contained in it as required, with a view to further informing the next steps in relation to this area of work. So with that in mind, the recommendations of 2.1 is committee members gain a better understanding of the commercial agenda, and 2.2, committee members track and review the phases of development as they progress. So with that in mind, do we have somebody that wanted to do an introduction? Is that Paul or Alan?
Yeah, I'll do a very brief introduction, Chair, and then Paul will take us through the report. As you know, we've been discussing the commercialisation of the way that we do business in the council and creating a commercial capacity for some time. Now, in this journey, what we've tried to do, and the work is focused on designing firstly an appropriate structure, because we didn't have a structure that could deliver commerciality. Also, what we've done is identify the required capacity to actually go on this journey, and members have considered several reports in relation to capacity 1, capacity 2, identifying commercial opportunities within existing spend, which Paul will take us through in far more detail, and you touched upon, Chair, as well. And there are several steps then into the future after we've conducted this initial work. We want to identify commercial opportunities, not just internally with the council, but with external social partners and social organisations. We've already had preliminary negotiations with the University Health Board together with the local RSLs, and then as we become mature in our commercial capacity and commercial understanding, is to identify external commercial opportunities which are closer to the open market. So I won't say any more because I'll start eating into what Paul is going to tell us. So I can hand over to Paul, Chair.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just take you through the report. Apologies if my page numbers are slightly different to yours. Obviously, I don't have the agenda, so I'm just working from the original draft that was posted on the agenda. So shall I take you through the introduction, the background, etc.,
Well, I mean,
right through?
The committee would have read the report, Paul, so
Yeah.
if you could just do a brief, interpretation and introduction would be great.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of commercialisation, as Alan alluded to, we took a report to Council 16th of June, setting out a phased approach to developing the commercial unit and the plan of work that we're going to take forward, which basically revolves around 4 main stages, which I'll come to in a bit. In terms of commercialisation, I've also drawn some information from the Audit Wales commercialisation report in terms of definitions and some of the steps that we'll be following as we take this journey forward. So in terms of what constitutes commercialisation, there could be a number of things here, because you could badge it as a function that would have a primary function to deliver profit or additional income for the authority, but that's always taken under the mantle of we are a public service provider, so that the developments that we're putting in place is also taking into account social, economic, environmental factors, etc. So it's not just a profit making venture that we're going on. Yeah. So we're balancing sort of the commercial activity against our primary responsibility in delivering services for our citizens in Merthyr. So I then I spoke a bit about the procurement process and where we were, etc. For a long time, we didn't have a procurement department within the local authority. We had a central purchasing unit that primarily served building maintenance department before stock transfer. We did quite a bit of tendering ourselves within central purchasing, and then around about 2010 we combined when we delivered the purchasing to pay system within the authority. So we then had a dedicated procurement team, which then incorporated the payment process as well. So we were covering the full purchasing cycle. I did do a couple of short infographics in the report, as you can see, in terms of our position. With regards to procurement, exactly the position where we were and sort of are is in between transactional, which is our day-to-day ordering, and tactical, which is our tendering activity that we do for various departments across the authority. Yeah, and the reasons around that is largely around the numbers of staff that we have within procurement to help service our departments. Focusing best price in order to manage reducing budgets, as we have done over the last 10 years. There's quite a bit of an administration burden associated with the procurement as well, in terms of gateway reporting and other forms, etc., that's associated with it. And in some cases, people see procurement as a barrier rather than a facilitator, because open competition is a good thing for public money, and there are places and people within the authority that would like to avoid that, but obviously our position is to facilitate open competition and gain the best deal for the council. So as I said, we've been generally developing across the last 10 years. We're fully electronic in terms of everything that we use. We facilitate sell to Wales. We use eTender Wales to do all our tendering on. We use a portfolio manager, excuse me, provided by Dun & Bradstreet for credit checking our suppliers. And we also have a spend analysis system called Artemis, which is provided to us, which we use to analyse our spend. And we have very many ways of analysing the spend. So everything that goes through Aggresso and all of our purchase card spend as well gets uploaded into the system, and then it's analysed on a monthly basis. And there's many ways we can use that, which we're going to increase over the coming months as part of the commercial unit. So within the report, then I give a bit of an update in terms of structure, where we sit within the structure of the organisation, and that is primarily phase one. So phase one was the development of the unit, getting some additional resource in. So we've got our first member has come in this week. So our new procurement officer started yesterday. So he's currently busy going through the induction process with us and starting to get familiar with the way that we work. The commercial manager is due to start with us on the 4th of January. And then the final third post will be going back out to advert after the commercial manager starts, because it would be more appropriate for him to carry out the interview process, as that person is going to be directly supporting the commercial manager in the collation of data and putting projects together, etc., etc. So there's a bit of logic to not appointing that post at the moment. So once all the posts are in place, I would expect sort of end of February, March time for the last post to be filled. At which point we'll already be going through our phase 2, which is related to your point around analysing our current contracts, ensuring that we're obtaining best value for money, etc., etc. So we'll be using the data that we collate every month, that spend data, etc. But also we'll be looking to see if we can overlay that with other data as well, because I know we've spoken many times around the business support grants that were administered over the last 20 months, and there's a wealth of information contained within that around our local suppliers and providers that A, we may not use, and B, we may use, but that data could be valuable to us in assessing our local potential. So that's going to form part of this phase 2 work as well. So we know who we spend with, we know where the money's spent, we know who spends it, you know, and we know trends related to spend, and we also know that there's some opportunity analysis in there. Like, for instance, we can identify our top spend, which we haven't identified contracts that's under contract, and then we can address those, you know. So there's a compliance issue in there as well that we can address through our data. And obviously then managing that data is going to be key to delivering some of our commercial opportunities through our third-party spend, which is going to form part of our phase 3 work as well. Within the report, I gave a little snapshot in terms of spend analysis, going from 2015 to 2020. So you can see it started off 86,000, reduced year on year to 66 million, sorry, and then 2020 gone back up then to 95 million, primarily due to the fact that obviously we've had LTF grant to build the bus station, and that forms part of our data. I just gave a little snapshot of some of the things that we can report on. Proportion of spend on SMEs in Wales, it can be SMEs in Merthyr. Proportion spend on third sector, spend on local suppliers with the highest volume of invoices, which impacts on our transactional services like payments, etc. Total spend by department, percentage of spend as under contract, as well as said. And also one of the things you may be interested in, which has never been really reported before, is I can provide a spend by ward as well. So all the wards in Merthyr, I can provide historical spend up to date, actually, on what we've spent per ward within the county borough as well. So it goes down to that type of detail, you know. So it's quite interesting to see. Phase 3 then is some of the really important work that we'll be centering on, and this is looking at our external partnerships, who we're working with, third sector, the RSLs, etc. So this is going to be around about, are there any opportunities in the county borough with other local anchor organisations such as, you know, Prince Charles Hospital, NHS, etc. To maximise local benefits? Are there any things we can do in collaboration? And this is the area where we'll be looking at how do we maximise our assistance and support to third sector organisations in the county borough as well. And then phase 4 is where we'll be looking at the opportunities for commercial investment and delivering income derived from those, obviously, or benefits. So that the phase 4 is a little bit further off at the moment. So as you're aware, we're very much within phase 1, getting the unit set up. 4th of January, commercial manager starts. So that's when the real work is going to start, as far as we're concerned. So then it takes us through to some of the recommendations laid out in the Audit Wales report in terms of following the building blocks of commercialisation, agreeing what commercialisation means, creating a commercial culture, etc. So I won't go into detail on that one because the rest of the report actually picks up on that, because in terms of some of the things, what we need to do next.
Paul, you froze for a second.
And then we're going to progress through. Oh, is it? My daughter might be on the internet, so.
Yeah, I don't think it was only about 2 or 3 seconds, so I don't think we missed much.
All right. Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the what we need to do next, because I won't go through the steps that the commercialization report stated from Audit Wales, because they're already set out. Yeah, and we're going to follow those anyway in a broad sense. So in terms of the what we need to do next, obviously we need to complete our recruitment process and get the unit up and running. We've already got the structure in place. We just need to fill those posts. We will be then looking at managing the pace that commercialization develops across the authority. It's really important that we don't rush it, because we need to make sure that we go through adequate process. If we find an opportunity, then they need to be fully supported by business cases and rationale as to why we want to do that. We will be looking at analysing our data and identifying those opportunities, communicating developments and opportunities effectively with key stakeholders throughout all the phases. And we will also, as I said, we'll commit to regular reporting on progress at whatever appropriate committee we need to, which is really important. So in terms of contribution to wellbeing objectives as well, that's really important. But one of the things I picked up on in the report is a bit of a forward scan, which is the social value and the social partnerships and public procurement bill. So there's a bill going to be presented before the Senate next year. It's expected to be presented in the spring. Sets out a number of duties on the local authority, some of which we already do. In terms of setting our wellbeing objectives and presenting those to stakeholders for consultation, etc. But part of this bill then is around about procurement duty as well, and about delivering socially responsible procurement goals through the Act. So it's really important, as I said at the start, that commercialisation is not just about looking to generate profit, but it's to deliver sensible services and protecting our citizens. So it's really important that we provide not only commercial, but it's going to be social goals as well as part of this project. So we'll be looking at linking the Wellbeing Future Generation Act through our wellbeing goals and objectives, down to developing a social value policy, which will take forward things like measuring social value, consideration of a social fund, and decarbonisation, etc., right, and all the environmental things that are needed with that. Because when you think about it, over 60% of our total emissions of the authority are derived from what we buy in. So that's our procurement spend. So it's probably it is the highest area that we need to tackle in terms of decarbonisation across the authority, and it's the same for every local authority. So that's a really important thing to capture now. We're already started the wheels turning on how we deliver or meet our duties under that Act. And then I also said about the procurement board. We have got a procurement board process in place. It hasn't met for a while, so partly due to the pandemic. But in terms of governance for commercial activity, I'm just proposing as an idea that we repurpose the procurement board. It is an office and a member board as something that we can use for governance of these projects as a gateway process, so they don't go anywhere without approval, basically. So that's a really important piece of governance that we'll need to have in place. And then the end of the report then was just showing that in terms of contribution to well-being, I picked up on, best start to life, working life, etc. There's a lot of overlaps between commercial and working life. And obviously through our contracts then we sometimes deliver sessions in schools on health and safety as part of specific contracts, etc. And environmental well-being is around assessing our scope 3 data, working with our suppliers to reduce their CO2 footprint, and living well, assisting social service partners to deliver appropriate contracts for independent living, etc. So that is the main area of the reports. Some of the members here were at the assurance board on Friday, so we'll be aware of some of the information, but obviously the report goes into more detail than what I went through on Friday. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so if we go straight into questions, we've got hands up at the moment to Clive. So over to you, Clive.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify one small issue, on page 9, under paragraph 5.9, you've got the structure of the unit set out there, Paul. And I presume that the officer down from the Deputy Chief Executive is yourself?
That's correct, yes.
But it's classified as Procurement and Commercial Manager.
Yeah.
And then we go over to the left-hand side and there's a post of Commercial Manager.
That's correct.
So I'm just wondering whether you might need to have a look at the title so it doesn't confuse the fact that we've got, I know you're the line manager,
Yeah.
but in effect, on paper, two commercial managers.
In the structure that that Ellis presented on Friday in the assurance board, my title on that structure was the commercial unit manager.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what it should be.
I think so, yes.
Yeah. I entirely agree, to avoid any confusion.
Okay.
If you then go to page 12, I've got a few questions there. Right at the top of the page, under paragraph 6.5, it says we need to be in a position whereby the central team is given a mandate to effectively support client departments across the council in developing innovation and creatively seeking sustainable solutions for future generations. Can you explain to me in the committee how this will happen and what are expected to be the outcomes?
Yeah, well, in terms of how this will happen, this really is how we engage our client departments across the authority, and it's really essential for the commercial unit to have early engagement on various projects across the authority. So be that, it could be 21st century schools, it could be domiciliary care contracts, etc., etc. It's having that input from the commercial team at an early stage in designing the services or the works or the goods that we need to deliver, so that we take into account all of the aspects. There's multitudes of legislation coming through and other requirements and best practice, and it's us working together with the departments, client departments, to put those into place right at the start, so that when it comes to delivering the contract, all of those provisions flow through to contract management, through to delivery, to the benefits. And that's where we can start capturing all of these benefits then, because we are starting now to pilot measuring social value in our contracts. But what we don't want to do is have to impose these things onto departments. They need to start thinking about these right at the start of the process, right? How are we going to measure social value? What kind of benefits are we going to deliver through our contracts that can be applied to the local community? Is it going to be a social fund contribution from a supplier, or are we going to say, right, we're going to measure it in terms of we're maintaining 10 staff as part of that contract. They're all employed in Merthyr, and there's a value to that. We're also spending money through that supplier locally as well with local providers. There's a value to that, and that has a knock-on effect, to maintaining employment elsewhere as well. So all of these things we try to bring into the tendering process, or the procurement process, commercial process even, right at the start. So it's getting that early engagement. So that's where it comes across in terms of innovation and sustainable solutions. All of these things have to be done right at the start. If we don't get that, then we can't deliver them later on. It's difficult to intervene on a live contract and change the terms and conditions of those contracts without changing the value of the contract as well, or the cost even. Sorry, Clive, you're on mute.
Clive, you're on mute. Clive, you're on mute.
Try again. Now that you've got the unit, or will fully be set up sometime in the new year, clearly it's of advantage for you to be there at the very early stage. So have discussions already perhaps begun to take in place, or will be shortly, to get all the staff involved in this to have buy-in?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If I can come in first, myself and Paul have already started sessions with CMT, Clive, and in the new year, then they'll be extended to the next tier of managers. And Paul will tell you better than me, but Paul's going to put a contract managers group in place, so that anyone who actually lets or delivers contracts need to be part of the group. There's two things there. I mean, Paul's mentioned it, and he's been really focused about, we got to win hearts and minds here, and the organisation and managers have got to sign up to this. But if people don't sign up to it, then also it needs to be enforced. So there needs to be the carrot and the stick with this, and this way in the startup phase, Paul is going to report directly to me.
Right, that's fine. That's answered my question, because if all the staff are not having to buy in this, or there's some reluctance to take part, it starts to fall down straight away, doesn't it, from what you all want to do. Another question is, same page, 6.12, it says we need to reduce maverick spend, less focus on cost and more on value. I'm sure you've had quite a bit of experience of this over the years, and that's something that you want to really, well, stop as far as possible. Tell me how you're going to do that.
That comes down to the three-line whip, I think, from Alan's perspective. And you know, what I've said about focus on cost against value, what I'm aiming at there is, so I'll give you, for instance, we could have a contract in place for the supply of PPE, okay, and everything on that list is going to be acceptable for use by the council. But then you might have somebody with an alternate position which says, I don't want to use those gloves or those boots. So they may spend an hour of their time ringing around companies to get a better price, right? So they may shave £1 off a pair of boots, etc., etc. But then in terms of cost, yeah, and value, we don't appreciate the hour that person has spent on sourcing those goods when they're already on a framework that can be just picked off straight away, and we don't interpret that as a cost to the authority, but it is, yeah. So we're diminishing the value of the contracts and frameworks that we might already have in existence against the cost of somebody spending an hour looking to better the price. But you know, it's always a balance, isn't it, between, well, they've got a budget to manage and they've just reduced the price, but at what cost, isn't it? And that's what that's about. But there is still, and there always will be maverick buy-in. It's just it's a bit of a term that can rub people up the wrong way, maybe, because some people call it spot buy-in, or you could have one-off buy-in that may not need to have, you know, a contract in place. So
yeah, fair enough. Okay, thanks. And on the same page, and you have touched upon this, it's under 6.17 and 6.18 about the social value. And I noticed you want to develop a social value policy and measure the value of our contracts to the community, in addition to measuring what we spend. Will the social value policy, will the councillors have sight of this when that's been fully developed? For example, you know, will we be asking us to adopt that at either full council or cabinet meeting when that's been finished? And when do you think you'll have that available to us?
okay, absolutely is the answer to that, Clive. I would say that we'd be looking to develop our social value policy over the next 3 to 4 months. Obviously, PERDA may have an effect on when that policy can actually be adopted, but it is fully my intention to make sure that this has full consultation within the authority. You know, it's a document that'll bring together a lot of themes, and it'll give us some objectives as to what we are trying to achieve in terms of social value. There's probably, I think, 2 weeks ago in the National Social Value Conference, one of the companies that were facilitating that conference said that they did a straw poll across Wales, and I think only 25% of local authorities in Wales, or was it 19, actually have a published social value policy. So there's something that's very much on our agenda anyway to do, but it's under the backdrop of commercial and social value, and obviously we'll need to get it done probably by June next year, taking into account PERDA.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chair. I may have 1 or 2 other questions afterwards.
Okay, so we've got this other hands up. So if we got Councillor Smith, and then we'll do Claire and Gethin. So Councillor Smith first, please.
Thank you, Chair. All right, Paul, how are things?
I'm okay, thank you.
Good. We're going to the procurement officer. How long have you been a procurement officer now? Because we have worked at this 10 years, 11 years.
Yeah, well, I'm in my 32nd year here now. So
in procurement, but you're an officer. Chair,
yeah, but
this is not so much of a question. This is a comment, because it's not a lot of questions you can answer here, because I'm looking at when we started Merthyr Valley Homes up going back X amount of years ago. It's the same type of boat. There's nothing. Blank bit of table, a blank table, same as Paul and Alan are doing now. So they've got contracts there, working with the local authorities. But this work is going to be totally different. You've got working, you've got to prove that you're having the right value for money. You've got to prove you've got the right staff. You've got to prove you work in the community. You've got to prove everything. And this is not going to be, this journey is going to be forever and a day. It's not going to end up in the next 6 months. You'll have a report. This is going to go for a long time, because I've seen it done with Merthyr Valley Homes. And we've got to have better training for members, because at the end of the day, members got to understand all this. It's not straightforward that you put X amount of money in. It's public money. You're dealing with public money, and you want a return. You have the best price, and everybody be knocking the door want to cut the price down, because now we're a commercial unit. So I think this is a good idea, but we want more information, Paul, at the end of the day, and you've got more feedback from members to get more involved, because this is the main thing. Members got to support you, especially next. You got an election coming in May, different ball game again. You got new members coming in, and they got to know everything about all this funding and policy that's in place over this procurement and commercial and this new business, because they'll be asking you to cut the rates down, asking you to cut the prices down on contracts for schools, because make government the same way Thomas's are doing it cheaper than local authorities. So, Chair, I'm sorry, no questions, but to myself, this is a bigger picture than we realise.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Okay, Claire, did you have a question?
I've got a number of questions, Chair. If it's okay, I'll take them one by one. My first question kind of changed listening to the conversation so far, because my first question was going to be whether the council were able to use or are currently using sort of social clauses in its procurement process. But Paul did mention about funds that sort of contractors offer then for wider community support. I was just wondering whether it goes further than that sort of funding opportunity, and whether it also includes clauses around sort of local training, employment opportunities. You know, for X million pound to spend, you ask them to take on 1 or 2 apprentices, for example, and just really wanted a bit of a feel for how the local authority approaches those type of sort of items.
Yeah, okay. Yes is the answer. So we do include social clauses and community benefits in contracts at present. Admittedly, they are more primarily around larger construction contracts. The community benefits programme in Wales is centred around contracts above £2 million in value. However, we have contracts where excuse me, where we have employed apprenticeships through contracts such as our local fleet maintenance contract as example. So yes, we do include social clauses. The social value policy will go further than what the existing community benefits program is, so it's a positive step forward.
Lovely, thank you.
If I can come, if I can come in there, Claire,
Yeah.
a good example of multiple social social benefit was the Morgan Sindall contract with the bus station. They did a tremendous amount of work with schools. They took on apprentices, plus we had an employment route whereby they directly employed people who came through Deb Newton's programs. So there are multiple benefits there, which obviously was a learning curve for us and a bit of an eye-opener of what you can actually get from a benefit perspective.
Oh, that's great, thank you, Alan. In terms, and you both sort of touched on a little bit around business support. Does the current procurement or the proposed procurement link in with the sort of the business support to identify really any contractors that are showing any financial difficulty? I think we're all aware of the issues being sort of affecting ourselves and sort of contractors and things around sort of material increase costs, sort of job shortages, and the jobs market pushing up sort of salary cases, and that could have a knock-on effect for the contractors that you were procuring these services for. Are you monitoring whether that's going to then have any impact on the delivery of the services that you're procuring out, and do you have anything in mind for how you would approach or deal with this through the procurement process? Would it be part of perhaps scoring or risk?
That's a difficult question, because a lot of this is monitored directly by the departments who are administering those services, not specifically within procurement. We do obviously check company status when we go through the procurement process. We also check in terms of capability, capacity and personal position of the companies through our pre-qualification questionnaires. We are aware of the issues in the market. For instance, we've recently issued a tender on behalf of the South East Wales authorities for the provision of highway materials. And within there, we've changed the pricing provisions to be a little bit more sympathetic to the market at the moment. So instead of the position where we were in a number of years ago, where there was relative stability in the market, where we could fix prices for a year, we brought that down to 3 monthly periods instead, so that we can take into account the fluctuations and allow these contractors to apply for price variations where the pressures are coming through from the market. And it also gives us visibility of those prices as well, so we're able to manage it better and forecast the pricing.
If I can, if I can come from it from a different angle as well, obviously from an economic development perspective, a business support perspective, we have quite a wide relationship with most of the supply chain. So if there are opportunities, for the sake of argument, I'll use Morgan Sindall again with the bus station. Then what we do is we arrange meet the buyer events, so that the subcontracting chain can actually meet before the contract starts with the main contractor to look at how they can deliver works on a subcontracted basis. And through our business support, and especially through the last 2 years that we've gone through with the COVID support to businesses, we got a pretty good idea, Claire, about who's what and who's struggling currently in the local economy, because obviously that fed directly into the grant support that came through the local authority.
That's great, and it's really positive to see that you're considering sort of the option of price variables, because a lot of people won't, if they've got a contract where they're only expected to spend so much, then they will expect perhaps the contractor to bear the brunt of the additional costs. I just wondered whether, because obviously I can see that you're going to develop a social value policy, but I was just wondering whether you have as kind of a social value statement or definition at this point? And if not, sort of how will it be defined, and will it involve any community engagement of what the community see as social value or potential social value from your contracts?
No specific definition at the moment, Claire, but that's a very good point. I don't think it would be positive if we didn't have that communication external to the authority, because it's our community that we intend to deliver social value for. So that's a good point, and that we can incorporate that into the development of that policy.
Great. And final question, sorry, Chair. Obviously, it's still very early days yet, and sort of you're kind of giving yourself scope, if you like, for things to develop as time goes on, and it's not going to be an overnight solution. But should you at some point in the future go down the sort of either charitable or commercial entity that's outside of the local authority, whether it's arm's length or completely separate, do you envisage that procurement board that you're talking about actually doing the finer detail around sort of assessing the level of profit that might actually materialise from such a venture? And would they be the people monitoring the risks associated with such ventures with the local authority?
Possibly. The procurement board change that I've suggested in the report literally was an idea, because what we haven't got at the moment is a clear governance structure in place for commercial opportunities. So it was a case of not reinventing the wheel. Maybe Alan has a different idea in terms of how that's going to go, but the procurement board is already there in terms of gateway process, and so there's a raft of information that needs to be developed in order for procurement to commence, and I don't see much difference in terms of governance for commercial projects either. But obviously the commercial projects would be more of a business plan rather than a gateway report. So if we're taking forward a commercial or third sector venture, then obviously that will need to be greatly scrutinized before any approvals are given. Al, do you want to come in?
Yeah, in the short to medium term, Claire, we don't envisage anything going external to the local authority, and possibly in the long run as well. There's lots of examples, mostly in England, where various arm's length and business structures have been set up around commercial, and I think the jury's out in a lot of cases, because obviously when we had the last dip in the economy and economic fortunes, some authorities really did get unstuck. So I think at this point in time, we've been talking about this commercial unit, myself and Paul, for the last 3 years, Paul. So it's taken this long to get here. At this point, I'd see it more as a social partnership with the local authority and its internal components and its external stakeholders, and there's got to be a process of co-production to put in place the best structure for this, rather than just marching out into some quasi-private structure.
Thank you. No, I totally agree, because likewise, I'm quite conscious that they don't turn out to be everything that they claim to say on the tin. So that's why I was asking about whether that sort of board would be the people really scrutinising and sort of checking out the risks. So thank you very much, all.
Thank you, Claire. Very thorough as always. Okay, so we've got Gethin has got questions, and then we'll come to you, Councillor Salmon. Gethin?
The first thing, just to comment, I'm just surprised that maverick spends are allowed, because if it's gone out for tendering, then that should be the end game. And if somebody doesn't go through that process and it goes outside, it is really a disciplinary action. I recall working for an authority, and there was a huge tendering process for laptops and computers, and they were far cheaper to have bought in Currys but you are simply not allowed. There's no room for disclosure or Maverick spends, end of tale. There's no option available. Anyway, that is a comment for you to reflect upon as to how the authority want to deal with it internally. My first question I ask is about commercialization. In paragraph 3.4, I don't think you really need to deal with it, really look at it. I'm just thinking of examples and financial benefits the council has already received from the commercialization process you refer to.
You're on mute, Paul.
Yeah, I lost my mouse then. It was on a different screen. Sorry. Yeah, so where 3.4 says that we undertake some form of commercial activity at the moment, that's primarily around sort of pest control, trade waste services and things like that. So the income derived from those services is generally reinvested back into those services directly. And obviously, when you consider what a commercial transaction is, it's normally buying and selling, isn't it? And the 95 million that went through our books in 2020-21 is primarily commercial spend, but not necessarily seen as commercial spend. So it's about, when we say about changing the culture, then we need to change the hearts and minds of people to understand that money is really commercial spend that needs to be approached in that manner as well. So
thanks. I just move on, and something which I think would be beneficial to members to have is if targets were set with timelines. For example, you've got several phases there. Okay, some are not very practical at this moment in time for the reasons you've already stated, but it'd be very good if maybe members have some sort of a spreadsheet where you could estimate 3 months, 6 months. Now, that not to be seen from my perspective as a tool of criticism of officers, but simply a basis of the members look at the progress which is being made, and progress will be made clearly. They can say, oh yes, you haven't done this yet. Yes, because whatever, there's always good reasons for it, but it'd be helpful to have some sort of a detailed base to move forward, especially as you are at a relatively early stage in dealing with the general commercialization process. The phases, each phase could have targets, reasonable targets, and members could have an easy read rather than understandably reading the document, which has got a great deal of information on, because, dare I say it, members on occasions can be accused of being a little bit lazy in reading paperwork, and maybe an easy spreadsheet might be something that they would relish as a starting point of looking at details. So I'm really saying, can you have some timelines, some targets, some outputs, so members can start viewing it at future reports when they are presented?
Yeah, I come back on that. There are some timelines and targets contained within the RTI plan. Obviously, since we've gone to council in June, some of those activities contained within the RTI plan may need to change, so that needs to be revised. But certainly, the plan is to create actions underneath the commercial strategy for the delivery of the commercial projects that we are going to deliver, so that at least we'll have stated actions and targets to deliver upon, which can obviously be scrutinised as well.
Yeah, I just add to that and make the same point, and cost benefits as well, which members can see and say, oh well, the system which you're involved with, the procurement general process, the commercialization process, is proving to be a great success and something to boast about for the future need, not as a sort of something to hit officers with, because I really don't want to do things like that. Everybody, officers do their best, and it's something of showing, oh look, we've saved X amount of money this year, or anticipate next year, whatever. Anyway, that's all my questions. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
Gethin. Was that last one more of a comment? I think that last, you just summing up, Gethin, were you?
I was really saying it's helpful for officers to have a base to work for, because it gives a target and outputs, which is something to boast about. So it's something maybe Paul can reflect upon for the benefit of the section he will be responsible for.
Okay, thank you, Gethin. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, it is. Paul, in 5.6, it says the circa £100 million that we spend in the course of our business is a significant influencer and benefit to our local economy. Now, sometimes there is that criticism that we don't use small local businesses as much as we could do, and it's met you have mentioned e-tender. I presume that's where anyone that tenders for work for the council has to be registered on that, because they due can't even say
Due diligence.
That's it. Now, with the appointment of the new commercial manager, will that be in his role to make it a little bit easier for these small and medium businesses within the local authority to get registered, you know, so they can pick up maybe a little bit of work from us?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I didn't mention, I didn't mention specifically in here, if you recall back to the council in 16th of June, the procurement rules also went up. And the one of the main focuses of our revised procurement rules for this cycle was that we wanted to help economic regeneration through the procurement rules by cutting some of the red tape for maybe some of the lower value appointments that we do, to enable us to appoint a local provider to provide a good or services underneath 15 grand with very little process at all. Yeah. So that was the first step. So what we're trying to do is cut the red tape at the bottom end. In terms of the commercial manager coming on board and talking to our suppliers, there's a bit of work. Obviously, we need to make sure that we don't have any conflict of interest here, because what we don't want a gamekeeper come poacher, etc., and backwards, is we'd like to support our local suppliers to get them upskilled to learn how to tender. We do have two processes. Low value quotes may go through on Sell to Wales, which is relatively simple, and it's just literally a post box on there for responses. And there is a bit more process involved in terms of e-tender Wales, responding to quality questions and stuff like that. So you might find larger companies may have a bidding team, and they're quite well versed in responding to the questions that we ask them. But it's about picking the right questions to make it more attractive for the local company to provide those services. You know, we do spend a lot of money. There's around about 18 to 20 million pounds a year of our spend that goes local within the county borough. You know, that's not an insignificant sum. Our spend analysis program suggests that could be improved on, but at the same time, we've got to be mindful of supply voids as well. So, for instance, if we said, let's think about how we can improve our spend on legal services in the county borough, that'd be very difficult, because the majority of legal services within the county borough are generally conveyancing companies and things like that. So they deal with domestic issues and not corporate, you know. So there are areas where we would have to discount. We've got an awful lot of agency companies in Merthyr registered for providing staff to the rail services, you know, so they wouldn't be within scope of anything that we would engage with them on. So I'm mindful of the market, but I'm also mindful of making it easier. But Ali mentioned, you know, the meet the buyer events, something we can think about scheduling on a regular occasion in terms of giving general information on how to tender. I did mention in a previous report around the creation of a selling to Merthyr guide as well, that we could probably publish and publicise through meet the buyer events, giving our local suppliers further information on, you know, who they can contact for information, where they can get support from, etc., etc. All of these things combined together, you know, will help our local potential. So that's very much on the agenda, Councillor.
Thanks, Paul. I was going to mention that I think you held an event maybe 3 years ago, probably in the Red House, where I don't know if it was Meet the Buyer, but something like that, where with people that would like to get involved in this process were to come along. I think some people missed it, but I think another event like that in the future would be fantastic. Chair, that's all from me. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Salmon. Just to sum up on questions, Paul, so I've just been making notes throughout, really. Something that seems to be consistent from all questions are the, and it relates to 7.6 of the report as well. We will commit to regular reporting on progress. So two sorts of common themes throughout this item, agenda item, seem to be monitoring requirements and consultation with public and with the relevant people. So I wondered, my question would be as chair, just to sum up, do the current arrangements we have for both those areas, are they sufficient to meet those requirements? And if not, what is needed?
Honestly, probably not at the moment. Yeah, in terms of detail on how we're planning the next set of phases, the intention was to work those phases up with the commercial manager when he gets on board. There's obviously an appreciation that, you know, this person is coming from private industry with a wealth of knowledge around how the private industry organise their business, and it's going to take some time for that person to get up to speed with the complexities of the public sector. Yeah, but as I said, the plan is to create an action plan related to the commercial unit phases that we have already set. There may be some variation to that as we go through it. Obviously, things are not set in stone, but in terms of the action plan, that's one of the first items that we'll be looking at developing. That'll obviously be a slightly moving target as we move through those phases. But in terms of engagement as well, that's something we'll be needing to work through with the other teams in terms of economic development and the staff that work on the third sector within Regen as well. So we'll need to tie up some working groups with those to deliver that engagement.
Okay, Paul, thank you for that. What I will do then, I think it may be prudent to, you may not be in the meeting at this stage, but later in the meeting, we always discuss our forward work programme. I think it may be worth us discussing as a committee, potentially putting this on the agenda for next year's work programme, just so it doesn't fall through the cracks.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'll take that up later in the meeting under the appropriate agenda item. And then finally, and this one is mostly to Alan. Alan, given the work that we started, that really good piece of work we started on the third sector provision, I wonder how the new social value policy, how will it address some of the historical and outdated processes we identified through that working group, and how the work that we started in that process, how that will be utilised going forward?
Okay, yeah, we got to a certain point, Chair, as you know, with gathering the information and analysing the issues in relation to voluntary sector funding. What was missing at our disposal at the time was to have this professional team to actually take it to the next stage. Because if you remember, we had a couple of brick walls which needed further analysis and a bit more capacity to drill into the historic patterns of service delivery, the contracts themselves. Now that Paul has got an increased capacity, an increased team, I envisage that we can collectively pick that up. And obviously what we've got now is a vehicle to change things into with the social value policy. It gives us a new home for us to embed the principles of support for the voluntary sector, and that's corporate support, that's service support and financial support. So we got architecture now going forward that we didn't have before, which is why really I think that work didn't fizzle out. It just hit the brick wall.
It was a massive undertaking, Alan, for want of a specific term that they use in you guys will be more familiar. It was a wicked issue. It was one of those issues where every time we lifted a layer, there would be another 500 things to think about underneath. You know, it was really, really complex, but it's just about making sure, from my perspective as chair, and certainly as a committee, I know we've all got a vested interest. I think our responses tonight have shown that. Just for us not to lose that, really, because it was a really valuable piece of work. And more importantly, Alan, not just on our third sector, but on the huge amount of really innovative social enterprises that are popping up at the moment. Yeah. And it would be really, really good if we can, you know, really continue that review, so we're not missing out on those opportunities for bringing those social enterprises on board, because very often they can provide a much more up-to-date, innovative, responsive service than something we've been funding for the last 25 years. So it's just about making sure that we don't lose sight of that. And if you remember in the introduction to this particular agenda item, I did link it back, because when we have the third sector support report coming in April, we will sort of be linking that back to this agenda item. So it's that sort of trying to close the circle.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, our support network for the social economy at this point in time is still strong. What we don't have is, again, going back to that capacity to link the sector to local authority trading opportunities. Yeah, absolutely. And it's good that we're actually addressing that, because that was the thing that scuppered us really at the time, Alan. It was, yeah. Okay, so thank you, Paul. Thank you, Alan. Paul, are you not hanging about now, are you?
If I may leave, Chair, I will.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Thank you ever so much for your contribution tonight. And we'll keep in touch regarding next year's work programme.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Bye.
Chair, I would normally be staying for the whole agenda, but unfortunately I have a message. I got to pick my son up.
Okay, no worries, Alan. That's fine. I'll see you soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye now.
Chair,
Okay.
Chair, do you want to approve the recommendations as in 2.2?
So 2.1, committee members gain a better understanding of the commercial agenda that we're taking forward. And 2.2, committee members track and review the phases of development as they progress. So are we happy to approve?
Yeah, I move that, Chair, and with the added proviso that this is put on the work programme sometime next year.
Yeah, absolutely, which we'll pick back up in that agenda item, Councillor Jones. Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on, we have agenda item number 4. So this is the corporate consultation and engagement process. This one is in direct response to public feedback following recent council consultation activities. The committee are keen to understand the council's current standard consultation process to ensure it meets identified need and is fit for purpose. The committee specifically wanted to explore the reasons why recent consultations had received a significant amount of negative feedback. At the last meeting, the report was deferred, so further information on the process itself could be secured, with more focus being placed on the consultation process and systems. And following that last meeting and the need for further information, I also met with the relevant officer, Carrie Dinham, to be very specific in terms of what we required as a committee. So today's meeting was supposed to be to review the report to develop a deeper understanding of the process and to secure assurance that this has been complied with by services across the council. However, having discussed this with the committee in pre-scrutiny and following on from the requirements that I made very clear in the meeting with the relevant officer, I don't feel that this report meets the requirements I set out. So what I asked for at the meeting was a copy of the strategy, the process involved, and then very specific the ability as a scrutiny committee for us to contrast and compare against the strategy and process. And unfortunately, this report seems to suggest that the policy is now under review, which poses the question, I'm not quite sure why we aren't part of that review. And secondly, talks about the generic consultation process generally, not specifically to us as a local authority. So I guess before I go to anybody, in terms of an introduction, I'd like to understand a little bit about how we find ourselves here again. Kerry, are you able to answer that, or maybe Andrew is the cabinet member here?
I'm happy to come in there.
Okay, thank you, Kerry.
Okay, no problem. Yes, so basically, the situation is that obviously you did request the process that we follow as a local authority in relation to consultation. I think what I was keen to do as well is highlight the process that we've always followed and the process that we adhere to as part of the national guidelines for consultation, and how we work with the Consultation Institute, like other local authorities do, to just make sure that we have that quality assurance in what we are doing. I understand, Councillor Skinner, perhaps this isn't exactly what was required. I mean, what we could have talked about is how this did fare compared to recent consultations that we've done. So I don't know, what you suggest. Do you want me to answer questions around recent consultations and how that fares, or the consultation strategy is currently being reviewed in line with our participation strategy that Welsh Government have asked all local authorities to adhere to, so that's why we're reviewing it. And that will be coming to council in the new year.
Yeah, I think, Kerry, the recommendation at 2.1 says the committee receives the report and its content is noted and debated. The difficulty I'm having, though, is that, we can't this isn't anything we can scrutinise. It's very difficult to scrutinise, and this is what we said last time, was we didn't really have anything to scrutinise against. So what we were hoping for was to see the strategy, and I'm all for the strategy being reviewed, but if we'd been able to get this right today, we could have actually formed part of that overall review, because it could have gone through the scrutiny process effectively, and we could have used those recent examples, and there are many recent examples. We've got the city deal, we've got not the city deal, sorry, the city status, we've got the active travel, we've got the greenfield site. So there's many examples of where we could have utilised the process. We could have looked at our process specifically. The one you mentioned is from 2015, which obviously is quite old now and up for review. And we could have done that comparison to see where there's areas for improvement, things we did particularly well. And as a scrutiny committee, we then could have given recommendations and formed a really proactive part of that review process. As it is now, it feels like this report tells us that policy is already under review, and this is how generically people do consultation. It doesn't really, for me, it doesn't really hit on what we asked for. So I don't feel that we can fulfill the recommendation at 2.1.
Right. Okay. So what you want to see then is a lot more detail around those processes for the 3 to 16 and the active travel as examples against our.
Yeah, exactly what I asked for in the meeting, really, Kerry.
Yeah. Can I just clarify though? We didn't do a public consultation on the city status. That wasn't a public consultation.
Yeah, it was engagement though, Kerry, wasn't it?
Engagement process, not public consultation.
Yeah, and I get, to me, they're both up for, they're both up to be looked at, really. I mean, can you do consultation without looking at engagement? Surely they go hand in hand.
Yeah, no, they do go hand in hand, but to do a public consultation, you've got to get council's approval to do that.
Right, okay. Okay, so I would be recommending that we go back, that this gets deferred again, unfortunately, on the, you know, in the hope that we can do this item justice. And also I would like us as a committee to be part of that review process, Kerry, if possible.
Yeah, there's no problem. Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, so on that, I'm going to make a recommendation that we defer this and open it out to the committee for any comments or contributions. Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Kerry, I think what we're looking at, what we really want is that, I think Chair may have mentioned it, but the current consultation engagement strategy, I think we need to have exactly what that says, what it is in the report, because some of the questions that we really need to be able to ask would be, how many people should we be consulting with? How can we gauge that a consultation has been successful? Does anyone look back at the results of the consultation to ask questions like, how many people responded? Are those numbers sufficient? How can we make consultations better? And who looks back at that data? That's just some of the questions.
No, that's fine. And a lot of what is in this report is our strategy, is our process, our strategy for the local authority. Yeah, I understand, and yes, we can answer all that. I mean, for example, we did, you know, whilst the 3 to 16 consultation was deemed as contentious, we had very few numbers compared to the A4054 consultation, which we didn't do as much engagement as we did with the 3 to 16. So, you know, sometimes you can't get people to consult, whatever you do. But yeah, I'm happy to obviously to go through that process and show you what we did, and you know how many people fed back and what we did as a result of it. I mean, you know, there's a responsibility when we do a public consultation of everyone to play a part, from elected members to the corporate management team to the lead officers, etc. As what we do with the outcome of that consultation. So yeah, I'm happy to do that if you want that to come back.
I did actually request that, though, just to be clear, for the committee and for everybody in the meeting. I did make it very clear specifically what we wanted as a committee. Okay, so Councillor Amos. Julian, you there? Okay, we'll go to Claire and then we'll come back to Julian. He must be having difficulties.
Oh, sorry. For some
Okay.
reason, I couldn't switch my microphone on. I don't know why.
Oh, there we are. Okay, go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, it's just, I think Declan said most of what I had my hand up for. But yeah, what we need, Kerry, is something that says, you know, why do you want to engage with someone? And the city, the city status was a big one, which I'm pretty certain if there was a really full consultation, may well have sent that vote in council a different way. And what for me anyway, I need is, why do you consult someone? Why do you engage with someone? What's the criteria? Presumably that's written into your strategy and your policy.
Yes.
And as a scrutiny committee, that's what we need to know is, you consulted on 316 school, and let's be fair, it took 3 goes on that one. We went out, we extended it, and so on. And you know, at the end of the day, let's face it, we probably got a good result. We got in terms of numbers, because it was at the end of the day, there was quite a big social media campaign by people who felt strongly about the issue. So really, That's for me. And I'd also like to know what other local authorities are doing, our neighbouring authorities, perhaps. And let me finish, Kerry. And maybe, I don't know, perhaps one in England. What sort of results they get? What sort of things do they engage on? What things do they consult on? And I think if we have that information, we can do a proper full scrutiny. Unless we got that information, we can't do very much. And obviously, sight of the actual document would have been handy. And I've got another question, Chair, but
well, I don't really want to get into questions because, you know, I would like us to be able to bring this back and scrutinise it properly. It was mostly to open it up to the committee for comments and contributions.
What I'm doing, but can I just ask quite a simple, and this is Councillor Andrew Barry. I notice on this report there's no elected member signature alongside the Deputy Chief Executive on the last page. It's a normal practice on all reports that come to elected members that the it's signed by an elected member, and in fact, I'm not quite so sure, but I believe it's a requirement of the Constitution that an elected member should sign the reports. So I'm just wondering why either the leader, the deputy leader, or Councillor Barry has signed the report. Is there any particular reason?
I would be interested to know that too, actually. Councillor Barry, did you want to respond?
Just coming in. Yeah, the issue of this report for me is there are things that have happened in consultation that I haven't been involved in. There are examples within the consultations where decisions have been made by officers and not run past me. The 3 to 16 example is where I feel education ran that consultation and it didn't centrally go through Kerry's department. I didn't feel there was control, didn't feel it was a position for its authority that I was happy with, and I made such comments at the cabinet of that consultation meeting or the consultation that I didn't think it was good enough. So there are many things that need to be looked at. I welcome scrutiny looking at it. I think what we need to happen is you need specific examples of consultation in this authority, and you need to take them apart and decide why they worked or why they didn't work. I think they have to include members. I think they have to include lead officers. And I think we've got a long way to go, is the truth of it. Because all those things have happened, I was not going to put my name to a report that I didn't feel officers were paying due diligence to and including members. That's why I'm not on the report.
Could I just follow on then, Chair? Why hasn't someone signed it? Someone in the cabinet signed it. It was to make this a valid report, which I think the Constitution requires. Why hasn't the leader signed it? Why hasn't someone signed it? Because if someone in the cabinet isn't taking responsibility for the report, then why is it in front of scrutiny? Or I certainly wouldn't accept this in full council, and I don't see why the scrutiny committee should either. So if you couldn't sign it, why couldn't somebody else?
I would support Julian on that, Councillor Barry, because we mustn't forget as a scrutiny committee that we're here to hold cabinet to account. So it does sort of put you in this hot seat a little bit there, Councillor Barry. What would be your response to that?
The issue stands. I don't think consultation's been done well as an authority. I think it's been run by officers. It hasn't included certainly me as cabinet member, and there are real questions over that. I think there's a role for scrutiny in it to explore that, and find out, for example, when the extension of 3 to 16 school was asked for, it was done without any consultation. Officers made that decision. I found out of it on social media. That's no way to run a council.
Okay. Okay. So again,
somebody signed it. That's why.
Councillor Amos, can everybody turn their microphones off? We're starting to get a little bit of interference. Councillor Amos, I pick up that you feel really strongly about it. Is there anything else? Because I'm just conscious there's lots of hands up, and this is obviously still very contentious issue.
It's okay. The question hasn't been answered, but why? I can see Andrew's point, but it still doesn't answer the point as to why somebody else.
I think that this is a general theme that seems to be developing, isn't it? It's just that, you know, there's questions are being left unanswered, and this is what we're pushing for as a committee. And I think that has to be our ultimate goal. So I will go to Julian. Was there anything else?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Okay, so if we go to, I know we've got Claire, Gethin and Councillor Smith. So if we go to Claire first, I think she was the first one to put her hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I declared an interest in when the report came last time in the 3 to 16 consultation, and I'll declare an interest sort of when the report is due next. So I really want to avoid any sort of discussion around that specific consultation if possible. I've just got some input really that would be perhaps would help the next report for members. I'm really interested to know is when there's a consultation done, is there any weighting system applied? So if you were doing a consultation on either an existing or a new opportunity within the borough, do the people directly living in the area that's affected outweigh sort of other users or potential future users of whatever that project is? So is there a weighting system in operation under the sort of strategy or policy? What lessons have the department learned about consultation during a pandemic, and how has that sort of been adapted, and what lessons have kind of been learned from either the sort of consultations and engagement mentioned or just generally across the borough? A key thing I'm interested in as well is how do elected members balance community consultation, because their role is discussed in this report this evening, where there's a conflict of interest. How does if we've got a councillor and they have to declare an interest because it's their area or they've got some direct involvement, but they are also the spokesperson perhaps or the people the community will go to, how do the community ensure, or how does the council ensure the community doesn't lose any voice or impact as a result of that individual's conflict of interest? And it'd be really nice to know, because obviously the report goes through the process, but it doesn't mention anything on whether there's an appeals process or anything that would follow the consultation and engagement phase. So just think perhaps those are things to consider for when the report comes back to scrutiny. Thank you, Chair.
Claire, just to what I'm thinking is what might be good, and Kerry, I'll take your opinion on this. I wonder whether it would be worth, so if Claire, if you're willing to send those points, they're very good points and questions actually, if you could send them to me in the first instance, and then I would be happy to collate everything we've discussed tonight in terms of the specific requirements and put it in writing to you, Kerry, this time. Just so there's absolutely no confusion about exactly what it is we need as a committee.
Yeah, that's fine. That's great. Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, thank you. Claire, so could you send that to me in the first instance, please?
Yes, certainly. I'll send it by email, Chair.
Lovely, thank you, Claire. And then finally, we've got Gethin and Councillor Smith.
I should be brief, as it's unlikely to be debated, but it has been debated, I think, some length. Anyway, my point is this. You refer in the report to some recent challenges. Perhaps you give a brief summary in the report when he comes back, anticipating he'll be adjourned. And secondly, what happened? I only make that point when drafting the report.
Okay, again, Gethin, if you can send that to me in terms of one of the requirements directly from the committee.
Okay.
And I'll collate everything for Kerry then.
Sure.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. The questions I'm going to ask is what the Cabinet member made. Some departments are doing their own consultation and all feeding back into the system in the correct manner. So how can we resolve that then? Because that's not a way to run a council. You can't have another department running around it and then Kerry having all the blame, but then they running around the chicken. So can we organise something to get that sorted out? And once that's sorted out, we've got the basics on it, right? And then we can work from there. Because if we don't sort that out, we go round in circles all the time. So that's my comments, Chair.
Okay, Bill, send that over to me as well, if you can, please.
All right.
I understand that is the case at the moment, isn't it? The heads of department do have a level of autonomy, is that right?
I don't know. I'm waiting for someone to answer that.
That brought you breaking up. You were asking me a question.
Yeah, sorry, Kerry. It was just picking up on Councillor Smith. I think he's right in as much as heads of department do have a level of autonomy with it. Is that right?
With feeding back.
Well, with the process they choose to do.
No, we follow a strict process. You know, there's nothing, we don't sway in any shape or form. Obviously, each consultation will be done on its individual basis, but the process that we follow will always be the same.
Okay. Okay, so with that in mind, if the committee are happy with what I've recommended, are we okay to move that? So the recommendation wouldn't be 2.1, it would be that I will collate the requirements that have been discussed here tonight in writing to the officer Kerry Dinham, and the item will be brought back to scrutiny again. And as a committee, we will discuss the most appropriate time for it to be brought back under the appropriate agenda item.
I move, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Kerry. Thank you, Councillor Barry. I think that's all.
Thank you.
Okay, are you guys hanging about? Kerry, you off now?
Yes, yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you, Kerry. Bye now. Okay, so moving on.
Sorry, Chair, have all the other officers left?
I think they have now, Clive.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just double checking. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody else. Okay. Sean, Julian, yeah, there's just us now and the co-optees. Okay, so item number 5, committee work programme. The committee should review the work programme and more specifically the descriptors of the reports. Well, the descriptors of the reports are not serving us very well at the moment, unfortunately. So for the next meeting, we've scheduled a review of the environmental wellbeing thematic report and the, I believe, the best start to life thematic report. So these are reports on progress against the corporate wellbeing objectives, as I'm sure we already know. This year, the committee requested the reports reflect back on progress made over the lifetime of the corporate plan to enable us as a committee to identify any lessons learned in readiness for scrutiny of the developing next iteration. So again, it's all about sort of having that eye on the future really in the next sort of work programme. Obviously, in light of tonight's meeting, this particular agenda item now needs to include the recommendation we made on commercialisation, and also this recommendation on the somebody help me, I'm losing it, on the consultation process, forgive me. Okay, so with that in mind, what are we thinking in terms of, we need to be realistic in terms of where we're going to slot things in. What do we think is the priority? What can we move around? So yeah, open it up to you guys really.
So do we know, Chair, the 2 reports that are due then for the next meeting? Have we any idea as to how long those are likely to take, both of them? Because they're fairly similar, aren't they?
Well, I mean, if you think, when we normally do the themes, they don't usually take a lot of time because we're so used to doing them now. So because we do them regularly, we usually just look at development since the last one. But this is a 5-year review. It is looking back over, how we've done on those themes from the beginning. And like I said in the introduction, very much about what we need to sort of take forward next for the next 5 years. So I do think that they will need a bit of time and attention, Clive. I wouldn't say they would be quick.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, I wonder whether maybe that's something maybe we could just do one of those next time and fit some. The commercialization one is for next year anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what I tend to do with the ones, anything that we've identified for the following year that we haven't been able to get to in this year, is I normally put them down on, if you look at page 38 of your report, there's a little box at the bottom. I normally put them in there. I capture them in that box so they don't get lost. So I'm happy to do that.
So Chair, one of these reports could be dealt with at the next meeting, plus the one that we defer tonight. Am I right?
Well, what I'm suggesting, Clive, is if we put commercialisation in the bottom box on page 38, that will automatically be picked up for next year's work programme. Yeah, so I'm happy to do that. And I'll get the work programme sent out to reflect that. So we've captured it. And then finally, we just need to find a slot for this consultation report again.
My own view, Chair, for what it's worth, is I don't think, because this is going to be the third time that we're going to try and get this report together, that we need to deal with it sooner rather than later. Yeah,
no, I agree, Clive. Okay, I would urge everybody, if everybody can really support me on this one, though, any contributions, you've already voiced it tonight, in terms of, you want the actual strategy, even though I did ask for this. It's very frustrating for me as chair, because I did ask for everything we wanted. But if you can all put it to me in writing, I'll do it, I'll collate it, and we can submit it in writing this time as a whole committee. So there's absolutely no wiggle room then. So if you could all do that, I would really appreciate it. And then what if we take out one of the 5-year reviews and put this consultation one in there? And we just need to figure out where to put that 5-year review then.
So how desperate is that 5-year review needed to be done? For example, there's a meeting scheduled in beginning of April.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why the one that's not been dealt with can't be dealt with in the April meeting?
No, I can't see why not. Particularly, Clive, as we've really struggled to get if you look at the 5th of April, tackling poverty update from Citizens Advice is something that we've continually had to push forward, because we just haven't had the engagement. We haven't had the, the buy-in. So.
And the CAB, we asked them to send it to the meeting. And
yeah. So okay, let's put it there for the time being.
Yeah.
And of course, what I tend to do with these things is I usually go away and discuss it with Maria, just to make sure that that's okay from a legislative point of view, and that we're not missing anything. But I'll certainly suggest that we move. Let's just be clear on which one we're going to move. So if we take the, I'm thinking, if we take the environmental well-being 5-year review, and we put that one down into April, pending authorization from Scrutiny support, of course. And then we will put in the engagement report in next meeting then, in place of that.
Yeah.
I'm just writing this down a second. Okay, is everybody happy with that? Anybody got comments or contributions?
No, I think that's a way forward, Jen.
Sian, did you want to come in?
Yeah, with the thematic reports, as you said, it is just a top and tail, basically, for an audit kind of purpose. We will be doing a new report. It's kind of like a bit of a 6th year kind of report on there, on the current report, like just another quick final review that we have had permission from Welsh Government to do, and then we will be doing a further report in the year, which will be the new report. But to obviously meet legislation, we can't be without a corporate plan, so to speak, and because there is new government with the LG Act and things like that. So I can't really see a problem it being bumped until April, because under normal circumstances, the new plan wouldn't be published until the end of April.
Yeah.
So, you know, they might kind of like be like, you know, be like that, be a bit overlapping with the new review of the report going up to committee and this kind of like finalization. But I can't really see any major problems.
Okay, thank you, Sian.
Okay.
Okay, so if everyone's happy with that one, we'll move on to item number 6, which is scrutiny, referrals, feedback and follow-up action. So before the meeting there, I did look at the action tracker. Bear with me a second if I can find it. And there was one in orange, in amber, and that was about the HR to send a breakdown of the agency workers to committee members. Details of any external reports or findings on HR to be issued to committee members. And then coordinate and deliver a workshop that focuses on the HR department to offer greater detail on key areas of work. So in relation to that final one, the workshop, I have already arranged to meet with Maria on the 5th of January, so we can start preparing for that. But am I right in thinking that those other two are still outstanding? So the extra external reports and the agency numbers still haven't been sent?
I would say they are still outstanding, because otherwise Maria would have updated them. She's on the board.
I think you, yes, she is actually, Sharon, you're right. Clive, I think you were one of the members who requested the agency.
Yeah.
And you haven't received them?
I haven't seen anything, no.
Okay, Sean, I'll chase that. I'll chase that tomorrow when I do these follow-ups.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't think there's committee. Are you aware of any follow-ups that we have that need to go on there now, or have we addressed everything this evening? I think we've sorted everything, haven't we?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Item number 7, reflection and evaluation of the meeting. For me, it's just frustrating.
You've done it.
Yeah.
You've done it, Jen. So there's no need to go into it.
Yeah, I think I did it throughout, Clive, haven't I, tonight? Okay, and then there is no other business, but thank you all for your patience and enjoy the rest of your evening. And the